If you've struggled in your life with self-esteem or making good friends, chances are high, especially if you had trauma as a kid, that there are some damaged and dysfunctional relationships in your past. And if you're like many of us with CPTSD, you feel confused about whether you owe an apology. One thing I learned from years in 12-step recovery is how empowering and healing it was for me to clean up my side of those problems. This isn't information I had learned before that anywhere in my life, but I learned it from friends who had gotten sober, who told me that their happiness didn't really get started until they had cleared up the harms they did to other people. For them, it was life and death. But some people, even though they're in the room with other people who have gone through this rigorous process of taking responsibility for their part in troubles of the past, they're misinterpreting how this works, seeking more to be right than to be free of the past. My letter today is from a woman I'll call CeCe, and she writes, "Dear Anna, I've experienced a lot of recovery via various 12-step programs, and I'm still on my recovery journey. I've got my pink fairy pencil. I'm going to circle things I want to come back to on a second reading, but let me share with you what CeCe wrote. She says, I'm struggling with friendships that I formed before recovery. That's common. She says, doing step 9, well, here, let me pause a second and explain. Step 9 is one that follows step 8 in the 12 steps. Step 8 is made a list of people we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all of them. Step 9 is made direct amends to such people, except when to do so would injure them or others. These are marvelous steps. So she says, doing step 9, I've looked at my part in these relationships, but most of these people didn't make it to my amends list due to them also having toxic behaviors towards me. Wah, wah, red alert. That's the misunderstanding. I'll come back to it, okay? I realize my attempts to resolve these relationships in the past were clouded with my lack of recovery. Sure enough, true for all of us. However, I'm worried if I go back and try to heal these friendships that the other people are not recovered enough and will just use my taking responsibility to put all the blame on me, which has happened to me a lot. Aha, okay. I'm going to come back to that. This is a common way that people are in the beginning. So I'm going to step in and be your temporary sponsor today and talk to you about that. I'm also worried I will be pulled back into old patterns and re-traumatized. Yeah. I still find it very hard to work out who is at fault and when I'm in the wrong and when they are and can get confused. I really don't want to invite this back into my life. Fair enough. A part of me wants to just let these friendships go and have a clean slate to make new, healthier friendships from my more recovered state. Another part of me wants to try again now that I have more recovery. I feel like I haven't tried enough if I don't at least try to resolve these friendships again from my new recovered state. If it doesn't work out, at least I have practiced setting boundaries, etc., etc. On one hand, I'm scared I'm just wasting my life rehashing these old toxic friendships over and over when I could be starting a new life, and another part of me is scared I am becoming avoidant and just cutting everyone out of my life and isolating myself and hates this new society where everyone is so distant from each other and there is a lack of connection. And I want to try repairing friendships from a place of recovery. Do you have any advice or suggestions? Thank you. Okay, CeCe, thank you for asking for my advice, because in 12-step recovery, that's what we always wait for. And I'm going to give you advice, all right? And maybe everybody else can benefit from this, whether you're in 12-step recovery or not. What it sounds like to me is you're either very new in recovery, you haven't done the first 7 steps, 7 and 8 steps, and or you don't have a sponsor who's guiding you on this, a sponsor who has herself worked the 12 steps all the way successfully, borne fruit from the effort and had a spiritual awakening as a result. That's what it sounds like is happening here. So the first thing I want to tell you is, don't go rushing into step 9. Step 9, when you go apologize to people for the harm that you caused, is a very important step, and it's important to get it right. So when I was first in 12-step recovery, within like 4 days, I jumped forward to step 9, basically because I wanted an excuse to talk to some exes. That's what I was up to. And I've seen other people do it. I wasn't the only one, but that's not how it's used. That's a misuse of it. It's not going to work. It didn't go well, because if you're just trying to make people be in your life, which you're not doing, that's not what you're doing, but it's just a little anecdote about me just to show you know, some people like they want to avoid step 9 altogether. Some people want to rush in. But there's a reason 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 10, 11, 12. And 9 is so important. 9 is the life-changing step. That's so much can happen good, but you have to do the prep work so that you understand. Here is what you would want to understand well. This is not everything, like so much becomes clear when you work this 12 steps. So much becomes clear, and many times our principles get reoriented, our understanding of, you know, what happened in the past can shift. It sounds like you haven't had any shift there yet. Like you're just like, those friendships were not that healthy. I miss those people. I feel like a bad person for moving on without them, but I, you know, don't really want I don't want to go back to the way it was. I hear you. We don't make amends to resurrect relationships necessary. We make amends to be honest and make restitution if necessary, to apologize for harm that we caused. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to resurrect the friendship. You can, you know, you can make a very thorough and proper amends by just saying, hey, I know we haven't talked in a while. I was hoping I could talk to you. I'm working on my recovery right now, and I realized that I was still very troubled by some things I did when we were hanging out back at this time. Now, one thing, when you make amends to somebody, it has nothing to do with their part in the problem. And believe me, that other people almost always had a part in the problem. I can think of a few harms. I've caused much harm to people in the past. I think I've caught all of it. I'm not sure. You know, but to the best of my knowledge, I have, and I try to do it immediately when I realize that I've harmed somebody now. I try. And I'm sure a lot of people will say, well, you harmed me. So, you know, if that's the case, I'll find out about it. And first, there's a process where you consider the harm that you did and you get a second opinion from a sponsor. Because when we're in early recovery, when we're just figuring out, like, am I just apologizing to death? Am I taking responsibility for something that had nothing to do with me? Like, we've all done a bit of that too. Or am I blaming the other person? Am I avoiding taking responsibility? Like, most of us simultaneously can do avoiding responsibility and taking too much responsibility in different cases. And that's the nature of why we need to be in recovery, because we're not super good at that yet. But this is part of our footwork to get good at it, to start to have realistic perception about, is it just me? Or did this person wrong me? Did I do it or did they do it? They say they're blaming me. Is that true? We live in perpetual confusion about those things. And the 12 steps, among the many benefits that they can bring, it's clarity about those things. So we practice. You do the step work. You do a thorough 4-step, you know, a written moral inventory of ourselves. You admit to God, to yourself, to another human being, the exact nature of your wrongs. You ask, you know, you get ready to have these defects removed. Then you ask for them to be removed. Now, CeCe, if you thoroughly do those steps, you're going to have some different energy and attitude towards this thing about listing the people you've harmed. When you do them thoroughly, it's very common that you will feel almost enthusiasm for wanting to clear it up. But the key thing is, when we make amends to somebody, we don't take them to task for their part. We don't even mention it. If you're bringing up, you know, it's like, I'm really sorry I yelled at you that time at your birthday party. But you know, you were whining a lot about the cake I brought. That's not amends. That's like trying to relitigate the problem, if you know what I mean. So, you know, you can relitigate the problem if you want, but it's not going to bring relief to you or healing to whatever happened. Now, a lot of the people that I made amends to, I didn't want to be friends with them at all. And a lot of the people I made amends to, I was also scared, because especially when I did real harm, when I did real harm, I was scared that if I apologized and took responsibility, they would use that to get back at me. But I'll tell you what, I was to the point of wanting to change my life so much, and I understood from the literature, the 12-step literature, that we have to be willing to go to any lengths. And so I wouldn't say put yourself in physical danger. If there's a risk that you would get punched or something, don't do it. The other amends not to make is don't go to exes who are in a relationship or may be in a relationship. The amends is let it go, don't have contact anymore. That's the amends. That's my opinion. There's too much of a temptation for people who, when they go to exes, to get all mixed up again. And it can cause their partner to be jealous or your partner to be jealous. And like part of what we're doing is we're getting out of the way of life where we cause hurt. So we clean things up. And so clean with X's is let it go. If they were begging for an answer about something that happened and they really need to know, if you want to, you can, but I would only do that with a sponsor's guidance to help you keep it clean and tidy and not like leaking over into like, we really should have coffee. We need closure. Forget closure. This is the 12-step thing is a very different approach. We take responsibility for what we did. If other people want to take responsibility for what they did, they will or they won't. Our happiness does not depend on how they handle it. But this has been my experience. I've made amends hastily where it wasn't genuine. I was still sort of injecting a little bit of blame on them with it. Didn't go well, started an argument. And then I learned how to make proper amends, good, clean amends, where I just humbly, sincerely, not groveling, but just said, this is what I did. I know that if somebody had done that to me, I would feel X, Y, Z. I'm truly sorry for doing that. I hope you can forgive me. I'm not saying, please forgive me like right now. I'm just saying, I hope you can. Like it's in, you leave the ball in their court and you are complete. You are done with your amend. That's all it is. You acknowledge what you did. You humbly apologize. If you choose, you can say, I hope you can forgive it. But you're not trying to make anything happen. And part of the wonder of the 12 steps is that sort of surrender to the process. You will discover what happens if you're thorough and you're honest and you're humble when you apologize to somebody. Now, humility isn't like, I'm so sorry, everything's my fault, you must hate me. No, that's manipulative. Just a simple, I'm sorry, I understand what I did. You say specifically what you did and how you would feel about it to demonstrate that you understand. And you can, if you choose, give them an opportunity to correct what your perception is there if you want. And if they say, no, that's not what happened. You know what you did that. And you say, then in that case, this is what you say, because you're in amends mode. You're not in litigation now. You're just in amends mode. You say, all right, thank you for clarifying that for me. I'm truly sorry. That's all. If that's how they feel, I'm truly sorry. And that's all there is to it. It's simple, it's clean. And when you do that, and you become uninvested in what's going to happen next, you still get to have boundaries. You don't have to be friends with anybody you don't want to be friends with. I have had to make my amends to people who I was worried about that. I didn't want them back in my life. And I wouldn't say that in a way that would hurt them. Like, listen, I don't want us to be friends or anything in the future, but I'm really sorry for what I did. So the whole idea of amends is that you give the gift to somebody of like restoring their faith in themselves, their self-confidence, back to what it was before you hurt them. That's all. And then if they fight with you, I've had a different reaction. Sometimes people go, what? I don't even know what you're talking about. I don't even remember that. Doesn't matter. I feel better because I've acknowledged what I did directly to the person I hurt, and it's been bothering me. Or other people will say, oh, I remember that. Well, whatever. Don't sit there waiting to see if they're going to say anything back. They will in their own time, maybe. But I'll tell you this, I've probably made 100 like formal amends to people because I needed to. And I think I've had people, like a few people, make amends to me. If they had the same standards I have, based on how hurt I was, I would have received more of them, but it's a rare person who can take responsibility. It's an amazing self-empowering step to just go ahead and honestly look at, like, how did I hurt people? There's no way to do that properly without a second opinion on some of these things in the past. Now, once you've got the hang of it and you've practiced with somebody who's done it a lot and is senior, your sponsor, in other words, then you are exhorted in the 10th step to make amends whenever possible, right? Continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. And that's the beauty of it. That's how to be a free person, is to just like nip that stuff in the bud. Don't walk around in shame and guilt anymore. If you feel shame and guilt, it's time to get back to your step work to see what is that about. What is that about? Is there an amends that needs to be made? And move forward freely with your head up high. Oh, it feels good to have your head up high. One person close to me says when they made their amends, they felt like they were going to they felt like they had wings and they were driving over a hill and felt like they might fly, that they might fly in their car. They felt so light. So it's a very powerful thing, but something to do right. So when you said here, you didn't make amends to people because they had toxic behaviors towards me, that's always the case. Don't worry about their toxic behaviors. Don't let them have a boundary, apologize for your behavior, and make your getaway, right? And they may put all the blame on you, although you can stop being afraid of running into people that you've harmed or that you think you may have harmed. You know, when you're not sure who you harmed in the 8th step, like I was taught, just list everybody you're resentful at. Somewhere, there's probably something in there where you've harmed them. That's a lot of what resentment is it's not 100% of the time, but often it's kind of a defense against like not wanting to be like, you know, they did all this to me and okay, so I did this to them, but I feel bad about what I did and I want to feel good about myself so I can apologize for my little bit. That's it. Most people can't do it. They can't do it back, but the more you do this, the more you'll discover that you can totally free yourself from the past, whether other people apologize or not. It's kind of nice when they do. It's rare that they get it right. Like sometimes people apologize, but they misunderstand what the offense was. But when people apologize to me, the older I get and the more that I heal, the more I graciously accept it because I appreciate the gesture that they thought of me, that they wanted to make anything better. And I'm just like, thank you. And there's a lot of people that are not in my life anymore, and that's how I like it. So there's a lot of people who aren't in my life that I wish were in my life. And so I've done my best. There are people that I have not contacted either because they died or they're in a relationship. But if I ever run into them, I know what my amends is. I've done the prep work. It's right there. It's right there. I know what to say if the opportunity should ever just land in front of me, which it sometimes does. So I wish you well with that. I encourage you to be brave, but work with a sponsor who actually knows how to do this. All right. And so that you can do the rigorous version of the 12 steps. So with that, what I want to suggest you look at, because it could help you with your step work and it could help anybody watching this, I do a lot of videos about self-defeating behaviors. That's the big thing in trauma that we don't always talk about. But when you've been living your life dysregulated and you had trauma in the past, it's almost inevitable that there's stuff that you're doing, and I'll say we, because I'm taking this from my own experience. In so many ways, I was defeating myself with certain behaviors that were trauma-driven. I didn't know better at first, or I couldn't control it because the trauma was so intense. But they were negative patterns and I wanted to change them. And so I've created this list of self-defeating behaviors that are common for people with trauma. A lot of the people I work with, you can look at this and don't look at it like, oh gosh, I have to change everything at once. It just lists, it's like a whole laundry basket of like problems. So you don't have to change everything at once. But when you read this, you might discover there's something that's a top priority for you and you can get to work on that one. And if you want to see that list, it's a pretty deep list. It's free. You can get it right here. And I will see you very soon.